Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala habibillah Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad ibn Abdullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Amma ba'd. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أبرئ نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي إن ربي غفور رحيم. صدق الله العظيم. For the past couple of weeks we've been covering the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and no doubt that there are so many lessons within the story of Yusuf alayhi salam that it's taking us a number of weeks to actually just cover it all together. As I mentioned in one of the earlier sessions, that the objective of the Quranic stories is not simply for the sake of the story, to hear the story, to listen to it and enjoy it. In fact, one of the integral elements of a good story is that there's a lesson behind it. Right? An integral element of a good story is that there's some form of lesson or lessons, a number of lessons that could be learned through it. And that's definitely the case with the Quranic stories. This is one of the reasons why when you look at the Quranic stories, you don't find every single detail provided about the story. Right? Every single detail of the story is not mentioned. Perhaps, inshallah, one of the upcoming weeks, we'll see, maybe we go over the story of Ashabul Kahf, the young men who took shelter in the cave. So when we look in their story, we're not going to find every single detail. Who were they? What time period was it? Those details are not mentioned in the Quran. Why? Because the Quran looks at a higher objective. Any story that comes in the Quran has a higher objective, and that is, what lesson can you, O individual, learn from this that will help you get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will help you recognize how to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to protect yourself from shaitan, how to protect yourself from the trials of the hereafter. And as you're living through this life, what are the challenges you'll face, how to go through those challenges, how to be patient, how to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these things are related to our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the highest objective. The highest objective. Connecting oneself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what state a person is in. So with that in mind, we continue with the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. We left off on verse number 43. And so here, there's another incident that happened in the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. Just as a quick recap, Yusuf alayhi salam currently is in prison, and there were two companions with him in the prison. They saw a dream, and Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted their dreams. One of them was released back to the king, and Yusuf alayhi salam had told him to mention him to the king. But this individual forgot, this companion forgot to mention. After a number of years, it so happened that the king saw a dream. And we mentioned right in the beginning of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam that Allah Ta'ala had given Yusuf alayhi salam the ability to interpret dreams. And then this kind of led us to a discussion on dreams and the nature of dreams. There are some dreams that are significant. There are some dreams that are not significant. And in any case, this king, he saw a dream and he felt it was significant. Okay? Sometimes you see a dream, and when you wake up, you realize that there's some sort of meaning. There's some sort of significance to what you saw. Maybe you're not able to connect it. Maybe you're not able to understand it, but you remember the dream. When you wake up, you remember the dream very clearly. And you're just not able to put your mind around it and figure out what it's about. In those types of dreams, if a person wants, they can definitely go to somebody who has knowledge of dream interpretation and ask them to interpret it for them, on condition that they are a person who does possess knowledge, they're a person of piety, and they're a person who has good intent towards you. In any case, I won't go over exactly what the dream was. We're going to kind of skip over it, but nonetheless, he saw this dream. He mentioned it to his court. He mentioned it to his ministers and whoever was there in court, that this is the dream that I saw. A lot of them responded by saying, قَالُوا أَضْغَاثُ أَحْلَامٍ. Ayah number 44. قَالُوا أَضْغَاثُ أَحْلَامٍ. They said that this seems to be one of those dreams that's just a representation of, of nothing. There are some certain times we see dreams where all they are maybe something that happened during the day. Okay, or maybe there was a thought you had, or something you were thinking about, or maybe something happened in the day, and then you just kind of see that happening in the dream as well. It has no significant importance. Right? It's one of those insignificant dreams. So قالوا أضغاث أحلام. At the same time, they're also recognizing وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَأْوِيلِ الْأَحْلَامِ بِعَالِمِينَ. We don't know how to interpret dreams. So at that time, the individual who Yusuf alayhi had interpreted the dream for, and who was released from prison and he went back to serving the king, he recalled that, I had a companion who was very good at dream interpretation. And so he mentions this to the king, and the king then allows him to go and ask Yusuf alayhi salam. And so at that time he goes to Yusuf alayhi salam, and it's very interesting to note here that when he goes to Yusuf alayhi salam, he says this ayah number 46, Yusufu ayyuha siddiq. Yusuf, O one who is siddiq. Siddiq is a higher form of sadiq. Sadiq is somebody who is honest. Siddiq is somebody who's always honest, yani who adheres to honesty all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that as-sadiq doesn't, but in general, in Arabic, when you say as-sadiq, somebody who even spoke the truth once at that time, you can say he's sadiq. Okay, you can say the word as-sadiq. Siddiq is somebody who's always honest and true. Okay. At the same time, it doesn't mean that a person who is, when we say as-sadiq, that he can lie as well. Again, it depends on the person. For example, the Arabs knew the Prophet ﷺ as as-sadiq and al-amin. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ never spoke a lie. Nabi ﷺ never spoke a lie. And the Arabs, whoever knew the Prophet ﷺ, had never experienced any form of lie. They had never experienced Nabi ﷺ to lie to them. They had never experienced Nabi ﷺ to be dishonest. They had never experienced Nabi ﷺ to be untrustworthy. They had always experienced him to be honest, truthful, and trustworthy. In any case, so he mentions this, and he then tells him about the king's dream, and he says, what is the interpretation of it? Yusuf alayhi salam, not only does he interpret the dream, but he also provides a solution. Basically, what the dream turned out to be is that there will be a period of time when the people will face a drought. And before that period of time comes, there's going to be some period of time where, there will be enough vegetation Then there's going to be a period of drought. And then it will come back to a year where everything will be back to normal. There will be produce and vegetation and whatnot. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, not only does he interpret this, but he also then provides guidance. And he tells him what should be done during this period of time. That right now there's going to be a period of time where things are going to go very well. The earth's going to be producing, its vegetation and its crops and whatnot. Store it, right? Use however much is needed, and the rest of it store for the upcoming years in which there's going to be a drought. Because the drought is going to last for about 7 years. Okay, so there's going to be 7 years of vegetation, and then there's going to be 7 years of drought. So in the upcoming 7 years, you prepare. And you make sure on a governmental level that all preparations are being taken care of for after the 7-year period. There's going to be 7 years of just drought. And this is, subhanAllah, this is like a side point. This is a side point. It's not really related to the tafsir of these ayat. But it's something that we can, draw from it. And that is looking at our own life. Our life, this worldly life, is a time period that Allah has given for us to prepare for a day when you don't have the ability to prepare for. Now, granted, none of us knows how long that period of time is. For some, it may be 20 years. For some, it may be 30 years. For some, it may be 50 years. For some, it could be 100 years. But whatever time you have is there for you to prepare. And you're already being told right now. You're already being told there's going to be a day when you're no longer going to be able to benefit. You're no longer going to be able to do anything. There's going to be a day that's going to come when you're no longer going to be able to work. Whatever you have prepared and stored, that's what's going to come to your aid. And if you haven't prepared or stored anything, well, you're going to be at a loss. And if you prepared and you've stored and you spent the time storing, then when that day comes, you will be ready. Whatever you have in backup, that's going to help you and protect you. That's exactly how our life is. That when the time of death comes, we will no longer be able to do anything. You can neither do any good, nor can you do any bad. It's done. Now, your book of deeds is not completely closed. That's also another important thing to keep in mind, that at the time of death, your book of deeds aren't completely closed, because any action that you did that perpetuates, that by its very nature it's perpetual, that will continue. So any good action that you did that by its very nature can perpetuate, the reward of that will continue to come to your account. So for example, somebody built a madrasa, somebody helped construct a masjid, someone provided for the education of an individual, right? Whatever good deed, or they gave good tarbiyah to their children. Their children then continue to do good deeds. Their children continue to make dua for them, even after they're gone. These are al-a'mal al-salihah that continue. Some call it al-baqiyat al-salihat. These are good actions that continue to remain even after you pass away. Your book of deeds is just continuing to register these in. And this is not just for good deeds. This is also for evil deeds. Someone who did a type of action that others learn from, and then others continue and perpetuate that action. Could be something like a bid'ah, an innovation in the deen that goes against the spirit of the deen. Somebody starts that, and it perpetuates. People learn from them. They continue doing it. well, they're getting a sin for it, and any individual who does it is getting a sin for that as well. And then when they pass away, even though they're done, they can't do anything. That evil deed is still being written in their account. It comes in some of the narrations about the son of Adam, Qabil. The Prophet ﷺ said that any murder, any killing that happens afterward, the sin of that will go to Qabil. Why? Because he was the first individual to kill. He was the first human being to kill. He killed his brother Habil. So anyone after him who commits this crime, this heinous crime, the sin of that will not only be attached to that to the individual carrying that action out, but also to Qabil, who was the one who started it. So this is something, this is a dream, and as I had mentioned, that what I'm saying here is not actually part of the tafsir of the ayat, but that's something to think about, right? That's something to think about. So Yusuf a.s. said that, and the intelligent individual will be one who takes advantage of the time that they have, and they'll prepare for that day that they know is going to come. Though they may not know when it's going to come, they know it's going to come, and so they prepare in advance for it. So Yusuf a.s. tells them that, look, there's going to be 7 years, قَالَ تَزْرَعُونَ سَبْعَ سِنِينَ دَأَبًا, where you will harvest crops, and whatever you harvest, make sure you keep it, in its shells, except for whatever you need to use, إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِمَّا تَأْكُلُونَ, whatever you need to consume, but the rest of it, keep it as is. And that's another hikmah, and this is another ilm that Allah Ta'ala had provided these anbiya, that in order to properly store that grain, and so that the grain doesn't go bad, Yusuf a.s. provided some knowledge about that as well, that this is how you're going to store it, in order for the grain, so that the grain doesn't spoil. ثُمَّ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ سَبْعٌ شِدَادٌ يَأْكُلْنَ مَا قَدَّمْتُمْ لَهُنْ. Then 7 difficult years will come, in which whatever you had saved, whatever you had stored, all of that's going to be consumed during this 7-year period. Okay? And then after that, ثُمَّ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ عَامٌ فِيهِ يُغَاثُ النَّاسُ وَفِيهِ يَعْصِرُونَ. Another year is going to come when people are going to, basically, the vegetation and all that will be brought, people will enjoy. Now this individual, then he goes back to the king and he informs the king, and as you can expect, the king, the interpretation that the Yusuf a.s. provided, it fit perfectly. No doubt this is something that Allah Ta'ala had taught Yusuf a.s. and this king immediately wanted to know, who is this person. So what does he say? قال الملك ائتوني به. The king then says, go bring me this individual. فلما جاءه الرسول قال ارجع إلى ربك فاسأله ما بال النسوة اللاتي قطعن أيديهن. When the king sent his messenger, said, go bring this individual, I would like to meet him, I want to know who he is. He was impressed. And so when the messenger comes to Yusuf a.s., instead of accepting this call, what does he say? He says, please go back. Please go back to the king. I'm not coming along right now. Please go back to the king and ask him to look into the matter of the woman who cut their hands. Right? Because Allah knows now, at this stage, at this point in time, how many years have passed since that. But it was under that whole, under those allegations, or something had happened, and due to that, Yusuf a.s. was put into prison. And here, this is a very important, reasoning here, is that this is a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't want to simply get out of prison while there may still be potentially some talk. He is innocent, and he wanted that the innocence completely be known. So until my name is not completely cleared, I'm not coming out of the prison. Inna Rabbi bi kaydihinna alim. Indeed, my Lord is very well aware, very knowledgeable of the plots of these women that conspired and whatever happened. So in any case, as he asked, the king then looked into this matter. So when they looked into it, قال ما خطبكن إذا راودتن يوسف عن نفسه. What was the case? When you seduced Yusuf, قلنا حاشا لله ما علمنا عليه من سوء. They said, Allah forbid. We know, we didn't intend any evil. At that time, then, seeing what's happening with the case, the Aziz, the minister, the governor, whoever he was, his wife now, musters up the courage. So many years have passed. Perhaps she realized she was at fault, and she had time to reflect at this time now, which is still a very courageous thing to do. If you're somebody at fault, you did something wrong, to admit to your fault is not always it's not a bad thing. If there are consequences that you have to face for it, fine, so be it. It's better to face consequences in this life rather than having to face any consequences in the hereafter. So at this point, she then speaks up and she says, الآن حصحص الحق. At this time, the truth kind of comes to light, and she says, أنا راودته عن نفسه وإنه لمن الصادقين. The truth is that I was the one who tried to seduce him, and he was always from the people who were true. He never did anything wrong. He is innocent, and so his innocence then becomes known. After this, the ayah comes, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. This begins the 13th juz. Now, some mufassirin have a difference of opinion here as to who is actually saying this. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. That I don't absolve my inner self of blame. Surely man's inner self often incites to evil. Is this the wife of Al-Aziz who's saying this? Is this Yusuf alayhi salam who's saying something general? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But here the lesson we learn is the discussion that comes about is about the nafs ammara. In the Quran, we find a couple of descriptions about the nafs. There are a couple of descriptions that come about the nafs. One of the descriptions is here. Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bis-su'. Ammaratun bis-su' means it's one that encourages, incites evil. In another place in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about another quality of the nafs as it progresses. And that is, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة. النفس اللوامة. Lawamah is that nafs that constantly reproaches itself. It blames itself. It rebukes itself. And the third stage, or the third progression of this nafs is then النفس المطمئنة. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Based on this, the mufassirin and the mashayikh have written that there are three stages of the nafs. You have the nafs ammara, nafs lawama, and nafs mutma'inna. Nafs ammara is that nafs that constantly incites a person to do evil. Nafs lawama is where a person at times will be incited to do evil, and if he does evil, then he reproaches himself, he rebukes himself, he feels sorry for what he did, he feels regretful, he makes tawbah. But then again, maybe he falls in that sin, again he blames himself, again he may fall, it's a constant back and forth. Final stage is the mutma'inna, where the nafs becomes content with the commandments of Allah Ta'ala, and it does not find contentment anywhere except in obeying Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. The nafs in reality is if you want to call it, it's a mechanism. It's a mechanism, if you want to call it. And it's a self-preserving mechanism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in insan. It's there to preserve not only the individual person, but also the human race. It is from the nafs that a person has desire to eat. It's from the nafs that a person has a desire to procreate. It's from the nafs that a person likes to get the upper hand. It's from the nafs that a person likes to get power. It's from the nafs that a person likes to gain fame. It's from the nafs that a person wants to get more wealth. Because all of these do what? All of these help make the nafs stronger. It helps preserve the nafs. However, when the nafs goes unchecked, then all of these things actually become the ruin of the nafs. It goes against what its objective was. Its objective was to protect and preserve. But when it goes unchecked, then the nafs actually self-destructs. It causes destruction. Rather than preservation, it leads to not only one's own destruction, but the destruction of then the society and those around. For example, food and the desire to have food. That's something related to the nafs. If this desire was removed from insan, a person would never eat. If a person doesn't eat, what's going to happen? Very soon, he would die. That would lead to his demise. That's an individual preservation. If the desire to procreate, to have relations, was not put in insan would never get married. Insan would never have children. Well, there goes the human race. However, Sharia, of course, Allah Ta'ala put this within insan, and Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knows insan better than anyone else, better than any psychologist, better than any doctor. And so along with it, Allah Ta'ala puts certain barriers, puts certain limitations and restrictions. So long as the nafs is within those confines, it is going to serve as self-preservation. And anytime it starts to go beyond those barriers, it will lead to destruction. Food. There is a limitation for it. Kulu washrabu. Eat and drink. You're allowed to eat and drink. There are certain things that are haram. حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل لغير الله به والمنخنقة والموقوذة These are things mentioned in the Quran, certain things that are prohibited. Likewise, in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, there are further things that are prohibited from consumption. You are not allowed to eat these things. You're not allowed to consume these things. Likewise, when it comes to the shahwa that a person has, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made certain limitations. A person is allowed to fulfill that shahwa through marriage, through nikah. And then there are limitations for that as well. For example, a man, Allah ta'ala has given the permission to marry up to 4 wives. Beyond that, not allowed. And the one, if he does marry, he has to make sure that even if he does have multiple wives, he has to ensure that he does justice between them. He fulfills their rights, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. But again, certain limitations. Likewise, as I said, because the nafs is there for self-preservation, there are other things that are associated to the nafs. Nafs wants power. What does power do? Power helps a person. Okay, there are certain limitations, restrictions. Kibr, riya, ujub, prohibited. What is kibr? Kibr is the feeling, feeling of superiority over others, and that others are inferior to you. This is kibr, not allowed. Riya is to do actions to show off. Why would you show off? Again, if a person shows off to other people, why do they do it? To earn respect, right? What does respect do? Respect brings in fame, popularity, which is a type of power. It's a type of power. You can control people. Not allowed. When you do any action, it must be done for the sake of Allah. Ujub, self-amazement. You can call it self-amazement, where you're blinded by your own qualities. You may not think others inferior to you, but you're caught up. You're caught up with your own self. I'm like this. I'm like that. I have knowledge. I have power. Whatever the case may be. All of these things, not allowed. Wealth. Wealth also leads to power. People who are wealthy have a certain power. They can control. So there is permissibility in acquiring wealth, but then there are limitations, restrictions. You have to give zakat. Along with zakat, Nabi Sallallahu mentioned, وَلِلْمَالِ حَقٌّ سِوَى الزَّكَاةِ. Or كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, that wealth has a right on it beyond zakat. And just because you've given zakat, don't think, oh, alhamdulillah, I fulfilled the obligation. At the same time, one should still continue to give, so that the love of that wealth doesn't rust the heart. In any case, going back to the discussion, all of these things that the nafs has, there are certain limitations and restrictions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put. So long as insan is within those limitations, there is self-preservation. Not only preservation of the dunya, if a person believes in Allah and His Rasul, then along with it there is preservation in the hereafter. There's salvation. Salvation is the greatest form of preservation, greatest form of protection. Protection from eternal fire. So the nafs ammara likes to incite the person towards that evil. And, in our deen we have this element of tazkiyah and tasawwuf. Perhaps you've heard the term tasawwuf before. There's a lot of doubt sometimes and confusion about this. And often people associate tasawwuf and tazkiyah to, esoteric realities and mysticism and, people flying or people walking on water or people doing all kinds of things. Don't get me wrong, that can happen. And those are what we call karamat. I don't want to make them seem, light or anything. Those are considered karamat. But they're not the objective of tasawwuf. If I had to describe tasawwuf and tazkiyah in one word, tasawwuf and tazkiyah is discipline. Is discipline of the nafs. If I had to define it, I would say it's the discipline of the nafs. Disciplining the nafs to obey the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what tasawwuf tazkiyah is. At the end of the day. Okay? Using methods from the Quran, Hadith, Sunnah to discipline the nafs so that it is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that it is within the parameters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set. That is the goal of tasawwuf. That is the objective of tasawwuf. If a person reaches that objective and they're not experiencing any esoteric, feelings or realities or, mysticism and whatnot, no problem. They've reached the objective. They've succeeded. And maybe from an onlooker, maybe they seem like an average individual. It could be, you would be surprised. Okay? You could have, an individual, a random uncle in the masjid that could have reached that maqam, even though he doesn't display spiritual powers or something like that. How do you know? Consistency. Person every day is there in the masjid. I remember, you see this in masajid. I know of one uncle, subhanAllah, Allah Ta'ala shower His mercy on him and lengthen his life and put barakah in it. But every day, he's there for the 5 daily prayers. This is again before this whole coronavirus, of course. After Fajr was done, he would sit, do dhikr, recite Quran. Recite Quran every single day after Fajr. And then when Ishraq time would come, that's when he would finish his recitation. And then he would pray Ishraq and then go home. And then in Dhuhr time, again you see him. Every day, without fail. There are different individuals like that in our community. Perhaps even in our own households. They're consistent. They do their actions. They have to read their ma'mulat. They will read their ma'mulat every single day. If they, for whatever reason, if they missed it, maybe they're supposed to do it after Fajr, they missed it after Fajr, they'll do it some other time during the day. But they are consistent. For the past whatever number of years, that has been their schedule. That is discipline. That is what we're talking about. So even if they're not able to do some sort of, again, mystical powers or whatever, no problem. These are individuals who have reached a high state. Perhaps they don't even realize that they are so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps they themselves are unaware that they have reached such a high maqam. It's why? Because of consistency. And that's how a person is able to subdue the nafs. Imam Busiri rahimahullah, in his very famous qasida, Burda, he has a very beautiful line in there where he says, النفس كالطفل إن تهمله شب على حب الرضاع وإن تفطمه ينفطم. That the nafs is like a child. If you let it go, if you don't put any restrictions on it, like a child, let's say a toddler growing up, and that drinks the mother's milk. If you just let it continue to drink the mother's milk, that's all it will want to drink. It will never become weaned. And once you take the step to wean the child off of it, what's going to happen? The child's going to be weaned. Right? It's similarly, when it comes to the time where the parents have to start, potty training their children. Now, in between, there's going to be a period of time where you're going to have to struggle. But once the child's potty trained, it's done. But if you were to let the child continue as is, well, the child's going to grow up and he's still going to have issues. Same thing with any habits, right? If you have children, if you don't correct any bad habit, you let them go. Say, they're bache, they're kids. You let them go. What's going to happen? They grow up. Nobody ever corrects them. That's how they're going to end up growing up with those same bad habits. But at that time when they're young, when they're malleable, you're able to remove bad habits. You're able to do proper tarbiyah. Then what happens? When the child grows up, they have good habits. They're weaned, per se. It's same thing with the nafs. And what's the key? How do you do that? It's consistency. It's consistency. Right? If the parents, for example, they're trying to potty train their child, say after one day they give up, the child's not going to get potty trained. It's constant, consistent, making sure. Now, it could be slow at first, right? You start off slow. Same thing when you're weaning a child, a baby, from the mother's milk. What you slowly start to, there's like stages. After, this many months, you start to introduce this type of food. After, this many number of months, you start to introduce this. After this, and once the child starts to eat these other foods, and slowly, it stops. It gets weaned off from the mother's milk. After a time, it doesn't need the mother's milk anymore. Whatever habits you build. So it's a slow progress. And same thing with tarbiyah. Same thing with the nafs tazkiyah. Often what will happen is we'll start on the path to reforming ourselves. We'll start on the path to tazkiyah and tarbiyah. But after a couple of days, what happens? We give up. It's not going to happen like that. You have to be consistent. And not only that, if you put a difficult burden on yourself, if you from the get-go put not only a high expectation, but according to a high expectation, you put that kind of difficulty on you, you're already setting yourself up for failure. So it's not bad to have high expectations or high goals. It's just that you have to be smart about how you're going to reach those goals. Don't expect that in 1 day, 2 days, you're going to become, mashallah, the next wali of Allah Ta'ala. Don't expect that, all of a sudden the tazkiyah and the tarbiyah you're expecting from the nafs is going to happen. It's going to take time. It's a gradual process, but you have to be consistent. That's why the very first step, it's actually twofold. The first step is twofold. And what is it? For tazkiyah tarbiyah, whatever is fard on you, you must fulfill that. That includes the 5 daily prayers. If you have zakat wajib on you, you give zakat. If you are fasting in the month of Ramadan, you have the ability to go for hajj with all of, meeting all the preconditions, fulfilling that as well. These are the fara'id. Along with that, having, a daily recitation of Quran, maybe a daily regimen of dhikr. Number 1. Okay? But starting off with the fara'id. If you have a habit of missing fajr, you have to work on that. If you have a habit of missing other prayers, you have to work on that first. Now, second part of the stage, the first step is what? So I said it's twofold. One is fulfilling, making sure you build a habit of doing the fara'id. Second is starting to remove yourself from sin. If you are involved, if you have a habit of doing some form of sin, you have to eliminate that. You have to eliminate that. And I spoke a little bit about this before as well. For example, a person has a habit of drinking alcohol. How do you do that? If a person has the willpower to completely cut off, I would recommend. I would encourage. You completely cut it off and you make the tawbah. In fact, that's what you should do. You have to eliminate it. You make the tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do this again. If there is some form of medical issue that's involved with it, then of course you speak to the proper individuals. For example, there may be individuals who, if they have certain addictions and whatnot, then they may go through withdrawal and whatnot. And so for those individuals, definitely you seek out proper guidance from the right people. How do you get yourself out of it? But if it's just a mere habit, you from this point on, you say, I'm not going to do it. And you make a tawbah. And you make a determined resolve that you're not going to do it again. And whatever things that trigger that desire to go back to it, you eliminate those two. You figure those triggers out and you stay away from it. And if you do fall, you again make tawbah. The worst thing that a person can do is commit a sin and then ignore it. We as human beings, we are going to sin. كل بني آدم خطاء وخير الخطائين التوابون. Every child of Adam is going to sin, is going to make mistakes. But the best of them are those who make tawbah. The worst thing that you could do is commit a sin and then ignore it. Don't ignore it. When you commit a sin, immediately do tawbah. Immediately follow it up with a good deed. That will help eliminate the effect of that sin. That will help. But then again, you have to work on it. And in the beginning, is there going to be some difficulty? Yeah, definitely there's going to be some difficulty. With all the examples I gave you, if you're weaning a child, if you're, potty training a child, is there a period of time in the beginning where it's really difficult? Yeah, it's really difficult. You want to give up. But if at that time you give up, what's going to happen? Then it's going to be very difficult moving forward. Why? Because then those habits, any action that you do over and over becomes a habit. It starts to take root. If the roots are small, you can easily uproot the plant, right? If it's like a small, when you were young, you in class, we used to do these experiments where you take like chickpeas and you plant them. A plant like that is really whimsy. You can easily uproot it, no problem. Something like you never built a habit. You did it once or twice. Okay, easily uproot it, make tawbah, never do it again. That any sin, whether it's addiction to drugs, whether it's addiction to alcohol, whether it's whatever it may be, seeing things, haram things, doing haram things, whatever it may be. It could be music. You just make the intention at that point, make a determined resolve not to do it. In the beginning, it's going to be difficult. Absolutely, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to work. And if so, it so happens that you do it again, make tawbah. Because if you ignore it, that's when it starts to take root. If those roots go deep, it's not going to be easy to uproot it. It's It's going to become part of you. Now, it's still at that time, it's not like it's a hopeless situation. Again, we always have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. But one way to help that habit or that sin from taking root is as soon as you commit the sin, if you end up committing it, immediately make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow it up with a good deed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ ذَلِكَ ذِكْرَى لِلذَّاكِرِينَ. Indeed, good deeds, they remove evil deeds. In the hadith, Nabi Sallallahu also said, وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. Follow an evil deed with a good deed. You do an evil deed, follow it up with a good deed, تَمْحُهَا, it will erase it. That's immediately what a person should do. From there on, what happens is slowly the nafs comes to the stage of lawama, where anytime it does something wrong, there's a struggle, there's a constant power struggle. But eventually, when you're able to discipline the nafs, it's going to be a stage where it's actually going to like doing ibadah. When you stand in prayer, it's going to actually like standing in prayer. It's going to be happy. The nafs is going to feel happy when it stands in prayer. That's an-nafsul mutma'in. It is mutma'in. It is content with the obligations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe it could be a stage where maybe it doesn't even feel the happiness. But it's content. It's content. And it's content with the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. It's through the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that hearts reach that state of itmi'nan. Quran, prayer, dhikr, all of these things then help assist. But those are step 2. Step 1 is you ensure that you're fulfilling all the fara'id. You have a habit of all the fara'id. And you at the same time are working towards removing any bad habits, sins. And along with then, second step, if you are able to be punctual in your fara'id, okay, now you go to step 2, inculcate further adhkar, further dhikr. For example, the bare minimum that usually is asked every day, a person say 100 times, Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. 100 times. 100 times istighfar, astaghfirullah rabbi min kulli dhanbi wa atubu ilayh. 100 times salawat. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. If you are not able to do 100 times, no problem, do it less. 50 times. 25 times. 33 times. Just be consistent. Once you've built consistency on whatever specific number, okay, gradually start to increase it. But those are the stages of how the nafs becomes mutma'innah. Subhanallah. So in any case, this is what Yusuf from the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. I ended up talking on this topic more than I intended to, but I think it's a very important topic, especially, again, I'll say it, in these days where we have an opportunity, okay, we as Muslims, we are optimistic. We're people who are optimistic. That's why, what is tawbah? What is the concept of tawbah? The concept of tawbah is optimism, right? You do a sin, you don't fall down and say, I've committed a sin, my life's over. You commit a sin, you get back up, you make tawbah, you get back up and you continue moving forward, right? So our deen teaches us this type of optimism. So same thing, we're in this situation, as depressing as it could be, as difficult as it may be. What do? We take advantage of it. How do we take advantage? Well, the time that we have, the opportunity that we have, we use it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for ibadah. So in any case, we'll end here for today, and we'll continue the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Well, we'll mention a couple other things. So at this stage, once the Yusuf alayhi salam, his innocence becomes established, then the king expresses his trust in Yusuf alayhi salam. So after he speaks to him, the king says, "Innaka al-yawma ladayna makinun amin," that indeed, from today, you are somebody who is trusted. You are somebody who is trusted, and you are somebody who we will provide accommodation for. At this point, Yusuf alayhi salam then says, "قال جعلني على خزائن الأرض إني حفيظ عليم." Make me in charge of the treasury. Make me in charge of the treasury. Indeed, I am somebody who will guard it. I'm somebody who is knowledgeable as well. And so from here, a couple of things that we learn is, number one, our Islamic philosophy. People oftentimes, we live in the Western world where the philosophy is capitalism. The Islamic philosophy is, you don't ask for a higher position. Okay, you don't ask. You build within yourself the capability and the skill that you could run at a higher, station. But you don't ask or demand for a high position. Okay? That's a general philosophy. Unless if you know that there's no one else who could do it better than you. Okay? Unless if you're sure that there's no one else that could do it better than you, then you can ask for that. But the general philosophy is that you don't ask for it. If it's given you, what you do still, that doesn't mean you completely, make yourself useless. Rather, you build in the skills within yourself and the capability that you could run at that stage, at that level. And so if it is ever entrusted to you, if it is ever given to you, if it is handed to you, you're able to fulfill that responsibility properly. Okay? Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh never asked for khilafah. He never asked for khilafah. He was made khalifa. And it comes in the narration that a person who is given a responsibility, then Allah's assistance is with them. And if a person takes on a responsibility, then that by him or herself, a responsibility at a higher level, then keep in mind that person will be left to their own accord. But with the exception to that is, if a person is certain that there's no one else who can fulfill that responsibility, that job, then you move forward with it. Likewise, I guess, again, if you have the skills, you have the proper skills, at that time you put your skills to service, right? For example, somebody is a trained doctor. When the time comes, at that time, you don't, simply humble yourself. Oh, no, I'm no one. Allah Ta'ala has given you skill. Then you say, look, alhamdulillah, I'm skilled in this. I could do this. This is what I can do. Okay. In any case, there are different perspectives on this too. There are individuals who really at times feel a type of humbleness, humility. At times, there are people who look at other circumstances. For example, there's a story of Imam Abu Hanifa, a very well-known, actually, story of him, that when he was asked to become the qadi of the Abbasid Khilafah, he refused. He said, I cannot do it. And perhaps one of the reason is that his own tawadu, his own true tawadu. But the other thing that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah also had in mind is that perhaps the Khalifa doesn't use him to fulfill certain agendas, doesn't put him in a position where he's going to have to listen to the Khalifa and jeopardize, the trust, the sacred trust that he has, the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. So there are times again there where you have to look at other things as well. But in any case, here, Hafidun Alim, these are true attributes that are mentioned along with it. These are true attributes that are absolutely essential for a person who is in that kind of position, who's in some form of position of power, is that number one, they're a person who guards that responsibility. At this stage, Yusuf alayhi salam is going to become the treasurer. He's going to have the treasury under his command. And so, number one, he has to be somebody who is hafiz, who's not going to act contrary, who's not going to violate that trust, who's not going to eat the people's wealth. Right? Hafiz. And number two, alim. You could have a person who's trustworthy, but he doesn't know what to do. MashaAllah. You see sometimes in government, you have people, maybe they're really honest and true. Allah knows if that's the case, but they have absolutely no knowledge of what they're doing. So these are two important skills. Hafiz is mentioned first, but alim is still important as well. Is equally as important that when you're in a position, you have to have the skills. You have to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, then that's a clear sign that you should not be in that position. Inshallah, we'll stop here, and hopefully we'll see next week if we can finish Surah Yusuf. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and allow us to understand and uphold the Quran and Sunnah. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.